will come to order. We will begin this hearing with a prayer.
Father God, we are grateful and thankful for this opportunity to be together this afternoon. Thank you for sunshine today. Thank you that these congressmen from all over our country can be here in this room to hear and learn of concerns that folks in our region have. And we pray that you would provide great wisdom and understanding as they listen and as we learn together. We recognize that in our nation right now, there are a lot of opinions, a lot of different ideas. We pray that we would be working together again for the common good. Thank you for this time, and we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Now the presentation of the colors. Now we will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now the singing of our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in the air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Yes, 14. Okay, now we can see that. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess of the subcommittee at any time. Under Committee Rule 4F, any oral opening statements at hearings are limited to the chairman and the ranking member. I ask unanimous consent that the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Bouchon, and the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Bergman, be allowed to participate in today's hearing. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. First and foremost, to the Mountain Iron Buell High School, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for allowing us to hold this field hearing right here in the heart of mining country. Mountain Iron Buell students, I'm excited to see so many of you here. As your congressman, I'm pleased to bring the Energy and Minerals Resources Subcommittee to your auditorium. And I also want to congratulate the Section 7A Girls Basketball Championship team right here from Mountain Iron and Buell, and the 9-man football team that are now state champions. Congratulations. We are bringing members of Congress here to see what you all see every day, to hear your desires, receive your input, and therefore make better laws and policies when we're in the halls of Congress back in Washington. This is an official House Committee on Natural Resources event. Instead of the Longworth Office Building in Washington, D.C., we are holding it right here in Mountain Iron. To my colleagues, staff, and everyone else that traveled here to participate, welcome. As you have seen and heard, we are proud of our mining heritage and culture up here. Our vast mineral wealth is one of America's assets, while providing an unparalleled local economic engine. We work, live, and play here, and we have massive amounts of minerals, and we will continue to mine for generations to come. And that's why these field hearings are so important. Words can only paint so many pictures, and I appreciate my colleagues coming up and visiting the Iron Range and learning more about our vast history. In the House Republican majority, the Natural Resources Committee is making it a priority to travel throughout the country to where our constituents, families, and neighbors live. This field hearing is one of many reasons I sought to be chairman of the Energy and Minerals Resources Subcommittee. Since my first days in Congress, I sought to elevate the issues our natural resource-based economy here in Minnesota faces, putting our communities on par with other communities across this great nation. About 140 years ago, we sent the first shipment of iron to the steelmaking facilities around the Great Lakes. Since then, our iron provided the raw feedstock that helped win 2 world wars and built America. Today, taconite, the ore that we mine today, fuels 80% of America's steelmaking. Driving through the Iron Range is a reminder of how the mining industry has grown and innovated to become the modern, clean, and forward-thinking community we have today. Our reclaimed mines dot the landscape where we see wildlife flourish, access drinking water, and where we recreate. Now northern Minnesota has an opportunity to supplement our great iron mining heritage with the non-ferrous metals we need, not only for applications like energy technology, but for our iPads, our cell phones, healthcare, defense applications, and much, much more. Occurring alongside the legendary Iron Range are the greatest untapped mineral deposits in the world. The Duluth Complex and the Tamarack Complex combine for 95% of America's nickel, almost 90% of our cobalt, 75% of our platinum group metals, and more than 1/3 of our copper. And again, this is only the supplement to our massive remaining iron reserves. But sadly, we are not currently mining any of these precious metals due to onerous permitting regimes, bad decisions made by activist administrations, and of course, endless litigation. For example, the New Range Copper Nickel Project is on year 20 of permitting and litigation, despite winning lawsuit after lawsuit over the years. The Twin Metals Project, situated on federal land in our working Superior National Forest, had its longstanding mining leases pulled and a massive ban on taconite, copper, nickel, and cobalt, and other platinum group metals. So let us be clear, this is a mining ban on critical minerals to include copper, taconite, and more. The Interior Secretary, Secretary Haaland, under oath in front of this very committee and one other, stated that she did not know critical minerals were present when she banned mining, despite her very own agency publishing the list of critical minerals every year. Therefore, I introduced a resolution 1 week ago that would use our congressional authority to disapprove of this mining ban and give the Twin Metals Project a fair opportunity. But the mining opportunities throughout northern Minnesota are limitless. Talon Metals in the small town of Tamarack, about 90 miles south of here, is poised to offer a mine plan of operations. Talon operates on private, state, and county land while continuing to discover world-class mineral reserves. The company has already signed an offtake agreement with Tesla, contingent upon permitting, and has made a strong commitment to our community. And I should add, I am disappointed that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle did not show up today. They were all invited to this committee hearing today on mining. Some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle say the right things at the right times in public and during election years, but when it comes time to vote, where the rubber hits the road, they do not show up to advance our mining, not only in northern Minnesota, but across this great nation. So I once again thank our witnesses from Minnesota's 8th for sharing their experiences, and my colleagues from Georgia, Indiana, Michigan, Virginia, and Wisconsin for joining me, and once again to the Mountain Iron Buell School System for welcoming us. Now for witness introductions. Jessica Johnson of Tamarack, Minnesota serves as a Community Outreach and Government Relations Manager for Talon Metals. Dean Peterson of Duluth, Minnesota is the Chief Geologist for Big Rock Exploration. Joe Baltich of Ely, Minnesota is the owner of Northwind Lodge, an artist and a bus driver for Ely Public Schools. I want to now recognize Ms. Johnson for her opening statement.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Try it again.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Stauber and members of the Subcommittee on Energy and Mineral Resources for inviting me here today. I am here today representing Talon Metals as the Community Outreach and Government Relations Manager. Talon Metals is a mineral exploration and development company focusing on sourcing nickel and other critical minerals from the Tamarack Nickel Project here in Minnesota that will contribute the raw materials needed for building out our nation's domestic supply chains. I am also speaking to you today as a lifelong resident of rural Minnesota, where I have a passion for living the small town life, farming, camping, making maple syrup, and enjoying the lake. The Tamarack Nickel Project, located in Aiken County, is one of the few high-grade nickel projects discovered globally in the 21st century, and is currently the only development stage high-grade nickel project in the United States. Talon has entered into an agreement with Tesla to supply 75,000 metric tons, or 165 million pounds, of nickel in concentrate from the Tamarack Nickel Project once commercial production is achieved. Currently, the United States has one operating high-grade nickel mine, and due to our current supply chain, 100% of that nickel is exported for processing and refining. With the Talon and Tesla partnership model, we are looking to recreate the supply chain and go from raw material to battery here in the U.S. Our team has been working to collect data on the Tamarack nickel deposit and surrounding environment in order to design a modern underground mine that meets environmental standards. As part of our company's tribal engagement statement, we are also committed to gathering input and seeking meaningful consultation with tribal governments. We recognize that underground mining involves disturbance of the earth, and that communities and tribal governments have concerns about the potential for negative impacts on the environment. We intend to submit a plan for the regulatory review process that addresses the concerns we hear and incorporates the values and interests of our communities and tribal governments. The mine plan we submit will utilize best practices for modern mining and the latest technologies to both protect the environment while also producing the natural resources required for the energy transition. Looking at the Tamarack Nickel Project, we can see the potential for discovering more critical minerals here in Minnesota. The current known nickel resource at Tamarack is a small portion of the remaining geological area of interest for Talon. And while we are moving forward with shaping a mine design for the known resource, our team is also continuing ongoing exploration. In our most recent efforts, the exploration team has intercepted high-grade, world-class nickel mineralization up to 2 miles away from the current known resource. As a resident of Aiken County, I have seen the benefits that have been brought to our community from mineral exploration activities. The project's land package of over 31,000 acres sits on state and private lands and has contributed over $11 million through state mineral lease fees for conducting our exploration activities. These funds are broken down to a local level, directly benefiting our counties, cities, and schools in the region. In addition, over $56 million has been spent on local goods and services in Minnesota for the project's exploration activities. Of this, over $12 million has been spent within a 30-mile radius of the project, directly benefiting our local economy. A case study on royalty revenue from the Talon project was conducted by the Minnesota DNR in 2021 and also estimated over $115 million in royalties for the future project. Our team has also made extreme efforts to hire locally, with 80% of our employees based here in Minnesota. For future underground mine operations, Talon has a partnership agreement with the U.S. Steelworkers, which will support regional workforce development. Our team at Talon believes that we can explore and develop new sources of nickel and other critical minerals for battery manufacturing in the United States, while also protecting the environment, cultural resources, and our communities. As a community member in Tamarack, I believe that we can do this too. It's an exciting time for mineral exploration and development, and I feel grateful that I can live in this area, living the small town life that I love here in northern Minnesota, while also being a part of our nation's important and historic energy transition that relies on minerals and metals for creating a sustainable future. Thank you.
I thank the witness for her testimony. The chair now recognizes Mr. Peterson for his testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee. My name is Dean Peterson. I'm the Chief Geologist of Big Rock Exploration. I appreciate the opportunity to testify here today as a scientist and geologist on the mineral wealth of northern Minnesota. I want to relay to you some fundamental facts on the geology of Minnesota and briefly discuss the unique set of strategic and critical mineral resources that these rocks contain. Mineral deposits form as the end products of a wide variety of earth processes and, in essence, reflect the tapestry of time, processes, and geologic terrains. Or one could say, ore deposits represent the preferential concentration of specific elements formed within the earth by the transfer of mass and energy over space and time. As we sit here atop the Biwabik Iron Formation of the Mesabi Iron Range, perhaps the most important rock unit in the history of the United States' industrialization and defense, I find it hard not to think back to the thousands of miles of terrain I have walked and the many, many tens of thousands of rock exposures I have described and mapped over the last 40 years. It is these types of field observations, once condensed and integrated into coherent bedrock geology maps, that geologists have long used to target mineral exploration programs for ore deposit types. I've submitted to the committee a bedrock geology map and a mineral resource map of Minnesota that highlights Representative Steiger's congressional district. Northern Minnesota contains vast expanses of 2.7 billion-year-old granite greenstone terrains that globally host a significant percentage of the world's mineral resources, especially gold, copper, zinc, platinum, palladium, nickel, and iron. The 1.9 billion-year-old sedimentary rocks in northern Minnesota record the Earth's first great bloom of life that released oxygen into the ocean and atmosphere and induced precipitation of billions of tons of iron and manganese out of the ancient oceans to form rocks that we call iron formation, including the Biwabik Iron Formation upon which this building is built. The final Earth event that my testimony will touch upon was nature's attempt to split North America apart 1.1 billion years ago in what geologists have called the mid-continent rift. When continents rift and the Earth's outer crust thins, the underlying mantle of the Earth depressurizes and partially melts, forming buoyant molten magmas laden with metals. These magmas intrude upward from the mantle into the crust, where they're either trapped at depth to form intrusions, such as the Duluth complex, or erupt on the surface as lavas. The transfer of these metal-rich mantle magmas into the Earth's crust is the reason why northern Minnesota hosts enormous quantities of critical and strategic minerals associated with the Mid-Continent Rift, such as like at Talon's deposit itself. Essentially every atom of copper, nickel, cobalt, platinum, palladium, gold, silver, titanium, vanadium, and iron known to exist in those deposits were transferred upward from the Earth's mantle into the upper crust by these buoyant magmas. The bedrock geology within the state of Minnesota represents a mosaic of geologic terrains that facilitated ore-forming processes unique to this region and underpins a remarkable endowment of mineral resource wealth within the United States. The geology and mineral deposits of the Lake Superior region in general and northern Minnesota in particular are unique. No other area of the United States of America hosts such an array of Precambrian rocks and the undeveloped world-class ore deposits contained within them. My few allotted minutes here for this testimony are not enough time to adequately describe the value and future potential of the mineral resources present in northern Minnesota. Give me a day or two and I can bring each and every one of you to exposures of rocks that record geological processes that drove the formation of some of the world's largest ore deposits. And then you can see with your own eyes, place your hands upon unequivocal geological evidence that the state of Minnesota is uniquely capable of fulfilling much of the country's needs for critical and strategic minerals far into the future. Thank you.
I thank the witness for his testimony. The chair will now recognize Mr. Baltich for his testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Joe Baltich, and I'm from Ely, Minnesota. We've established that already, but I'm redundant. I'm a small business owner who operates Northwind Lodge, a family-oriented wilderness resort that has existed since my grandfather built the first cabin on Jasper Lake in 1939. I live 15 miles northeast of Ely, surrounded by the Boundary Waters Canoe Area border on 3 sides. In conjunction with the resort, I have spent 35 years in wilderness canoe trip outfitting and guiding, and we ran a cross-country ski center as well. I'm also an artist who paints fine art, and like many people who have spent their entire lives in Ely, my third job is as a bus driver for the Ely Independent School District 696. As a tourism operator, I'm exposed firsthand to the impact tourism has on the Ely area. 45 years of working in tourism proves it will always be a fluid feast or famine business. When I was a kid, like many other resort owners, my dad was also otherwise employed. He was a police officer for the city of Ely. He also guided fishing trips and trapped on the side. During my early years, our family food supply was often supplemented by hunting and fishing. Based on my life experience and observations, tourism alone will never carry the region. It just can't. Upon graduating from college in the early 80s, I ran for office and was elected as mayor of Ely. During that time, we were coming off of a bad economic recession. Reserve Mine in neighboring Babbitt had closed for good, which resulted in 1,300 families leaving Ely. As city council members, we were tasked with finding a viable industry to keep our people employed. We found that due to Ely's remote location, the high cost of shipping stifled our competitiveness. Ely ended up relying on non-tax-paying governmental entities to become limited job providers, and of course we had summer tourism and some logging. Today, as is evident in the empty homes and storefronts that now still line our streets, we are still struggling. In Ely, Goodwill couldn't even make it when selling a free inventory. Accordingly, I will say that the pandemic flurry of activity that we've just experienced will be fleeting as well. Iron ore from Ely and the range was consequential to winning World War II and also rebuilding war-torn Europe and Japan in the years following. After 88 years of unregulated massive iron mining into the early 70s, the federal government found our most precious resource, our water, to be pristine enough to create a designated wilderness park called the Boundary Waters Canoe Area. We are all told that the highly restrictive BWCA was going to be a big draw for tourism, but with about 100,000 visitors to the park per year spread over 6 different access regions and limited travel permits, that was a lot of baloney. Meanwhile, there are constant environmental lawsuits directed at mines for supposed BWCA pollution. Living next to this park feels like having a perpetually vindictive dog waiting to bite us for some environmentalist perceived infraction. Despite alleged dust and water from mining, our water is still clean, the air is fantastic, and our fishing is still awesome. We have abundant wildlife. This despite all the claims against the mining industry, which has operated for far longer than the Boundary Waters has existed. Like slip and fall attorneys, I'm convinced that environmentalists mainly litigate for cash flow. Given the market-based volatility of the taconite industry, mining diversity is sensible. Copper nickel would add regional stability to the range. Filling the need for critical minerals mined and controlled inside the United States for the national defense is just plain smart. With the massive tax dollars that would benefit all Minnesotans, the gains to the Mineral Trust Fund for schools, and the strong market demand, copper nickel mining is the way of our current and distant future. The year is 2023, not 1955. Modern mining technology and local miners are fully capable of performing well at both polymet and twin metals. A current example of successful modern-day mining in a water-rich environment is the Eagle Mine in western Marquette County, Michigan. They literally began mining copper in 2014 under Obama's EPA and have expanded their underground operations since. How come they can do it? Ely is sitting on an estimated $550 billion in copper nickel. I'll repeat, $550 billion of copper nickel. I want to see 200 and more year-round employed copper nickel miners making $85,000 per year while shopping in the region and at Ely's grocery store, so it'll be there when I'm 80 years old. Copper mining will actually improve the tourism industry. Just like Red Lake, Ontario, where for 40 years they've mined gold immediately next to their beautiful Woodland Caribou Park, our Boundary Waters will remain as it is today, beautiful and inaccessible. Based on our state and federal laws and regulations, plus an experienced, proud workforce, there is no rational reason that says Americans, namely Iron Rangers, can't get this done right. We can and we will. Thank you.
I want to thank the witnesses for your testimony. And now we will move to the questions portion. I first recognize myself for 5 minutes. Ms. Johnson, Mr. Baltich, and Mr. Peterson, great to see you all here again today, and I appreciate you coming and giving your testimony. Mr. Peterson, in your testimony you stated, and I quote, "No other area of the United States of America hosts such an array of Precambrian rocks and the world-class ore deposits that these rocks contain," end quote. That's high praise. Yet we are only mining iron right now compared to other non-ferrous deposits that you have mapped. What makes the Duluth complex, the Tamarack complex, and the rest of our geology up here so special?
Well, what makes it so special is what I described, the 1.1 billion year old mid-continent rift. When you melt the mantle, you exchange all those elements from the Earth's mantle and drive them up into the crust. And there is no other part of the United States of America that something like that happened. We've talked about the Eagle Mine in Michigan. That's part of the mid-continent rift. It's part of the same process. But the rocks there have been uplifted a little bit differently than they are in Minnesota. So we don't see the intrusions at depth like we do in the whole Duluth complex. And the Duluth complex, as a mafic intrusive body, is the third largest known on Earth. You know, it's gigantic, kind of intrusive body that goes from Duluth up toward Ely and then all the way almost to Grand Marais. It's a giant body of rocks that actually, when you're out there, I mean, you go south of Ely on Highway 1, you cross the Quishway River, and you'll be in rocks that 100% of it is from the Earth's mantle. And there's nowhere else in the United States that has things like that at all. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Johnson, thank you for joining us today. The Tamarack project on state and local land is generating millions in revenue in Aiken County and the state of Minnesota. Once the mine plan is offered and you were to get a project up and running, can you discuss the further investment that would follow and how that would further benefit an area in need of economic development?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, in 2021, the Minnesota DNR did a case study on the Tamarack project for the estimated royalty revenue, and that was estimated at over $115 million. So those funds would be broken down between the state, county, township, and the local school district. And this is really a huge impact for our area in Aiken County. If you're not familiar, Aiken County has a population of approximately 9 people per square mile. And in the city of Tamarack, where our project is located, we have a population of 62 people. So the revenue like this would be greatly beneficial.
In one of the poorest counties in the state.
Yes, yep. And then for future jobs, we're currently estimating about 150 additional jobs to what we already have on site, which is about 80 for the mine operations. That is not including construction phase as well. So there would be more to come with that.
Can you discuss some of the local support for the Talon project?
Yeah, so with my role with community outreach, I have the privilege of hearing a lot of different perspectives on our project. We have quite a few local year-round residents that we've built some strong relationships with. This project has been explored since 2002. So a lot of times our supporters in the area, we often hear them say, "When are you going to finally start mining?" That's typically the question that we hear. But we also hear people that have concerns as well, just with the fear of potential negative impacts. And I really think that hearing those concerns is helpful at this early stage because we can incorporate those perspectives as we're still shaping our mine plan. But overall, in the community, I really would say that the majority of people are neutral. They understand and acknowledge the need for minerals and metals in our daily life, but they also want to see the environment protected, and that's a good thing. And I think that's what we're about to enter with our project as we start the permitting process.
Thank you very much. Mr. Baltich, as a former mayor of Ely, you saw what happens to regions when mining operations decline, and as a longtime resort owner, you testified about the resort industry's feast or famine business. Can you share with the audience the impact that copper nickel mining would have on Ely and the surrounding area, and how modern mining can truly diversify the economy?
Sure. An immediate impact would be if a mine was up and running and they had a number of employees. Those employees all have family. And back in the 70s, when the mines were running, when Reserve Mine, that was a big employer to Ely back at that time. When they were operational, it was not uncommon at all to have lodge guests come to stay at our resort that had kids that were working in the mines. And, the adult children with their families. And so grandma and grandpa would come stay at the resort, and then they'd have the grandkids for the day. They'd babysit, they'd go down by the beach, hang out and go fishing, or they'd go visit the kids when the kid had a day off. But they didn't want to stay with the kids. They wanted to stay at a nice resort somewhere so they could have a nice time. And then when it gives time to hand over the grandkids at the end of the day, you hand them over and then you go back to the resort, and stay there in a nice cabin. And so we used to see that all the time. And if we saw it, so did many other places. It's not just us. And so the impact is a very direct impact from having employed people staying by us, because we don't see that now. It's not often that we'll see somebody who stays at the resort because they have employees working at the hospital or at the Forest Service, maybe once in a while. But mining, it was a very regular thing. And so we would see that, and my motivation for this whole thing is to keep a grocery store going for when I'm old. I don't want to have to rely on Amazon.com to get my celery. As I kind of want to have something when I'm in Ely, because I'm watching all kinds of beautiful storefronts in Ely that have got stud walls inside. It's because there's nothing in them. People are fixed up the outside and are waiting for somebody to come and rent it. Oh boy, how many years now? 7, 8, 9 years are waiting and waiting and waiting. It's time that we have something that gives solid year-round employment to a large body of people, because we've got an industry sitting here, it's just underground, and there's no reason why we can't be going underground 5,500 feet below the Earth's surface and mining and hauling it out. I just can't see how it's going to disturb anybody.
Thank you, Mr. Baltich. My time has expired.
Oops.
I will now turn the questioning for 5 minutes over to Mr. Whitman from the state of Virginia.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thank you so much for holding this hearing. We are honored to be here in northern Minnesota in your district. What an incredible, incredible place. We're just very enthralled by the richness of resources here, but the most amazing resource are the people of northern Minnesota. So thank you so much. I want to thank our witnesses here today, Dr. Peterson, Ms. Johnson, Mr. Baltich. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your perspective with things. Dr. Peterson, I want to begin with you. I really am taken by your testimony about the richness of the mineral resources here in northern Minnesota. You talked about the mid-continent rift and how it's unique geologically to this area. Give me your perspective. You know these resources probably than any other geologist on the face of the earth. Probably know them better. Give us a perspective quantity-wise as you would quantify how much of those non-ferrous minerals are here in this mid-continent rift in northern Minnesota versus not just in the United States, but maybe any other place in the world.
Yeah, actually, in my written testimony, I actually have some numbers. I don't know if you've seen those numbers,
did.
right? I don't have
Yes,
that in front of me,
yes,
so
yes.
I don't know exactly the numbers, but I know, and those numbers are actually real. They're not mine. They're actually numbers that are what we call in NI 43-101 reports. It's actually because the companies like the Duluth Metals that I was involved with, and all these Talon is probably, they have to disclose information to because they're public companies to shareholders. And there's rules. There's very strict rules. If anybody's ever had to deal with the SEC or something, it's very strict rules, right? So companies have to do this, and they have to actually disclose information. And those are all public documents. And over the, long time, I can compile that information like anybody can, right? And I know, maybe Representative, you have those numbers, but
Yes.
I know in copper there's, defined in these resources is 86 billion pounds of copper. Mm-hmm. And anybody can do the math, right? That $4 a pound is there it is. And those numbers are in situ. That's actually the amount of material in the rock itself. You can't mine all that unless you do an open pit, but if it's underground, you have to leave, quite a bit of it there because you can't mine it all. But those are the numbers that are there, and all those numbers just represent the boundary of resources that have been drilled. There's a whole bunch of other areas, probably 15-20% of the known kind of mineralized zone are within those numbers, But there's not enough information to define them. But they're gigantic numbers worldwide, and copper of this type of deposit is, I think, the second largest, the third largest known kind of nickel resource of these kind of deposits formed from melting the mantle, which are the major, sources of those metals, on Earth. And the platinum and palladium, they're also gigantic numbers, kind of, worldwide. And there's really nothing like it in the United States, anything else like that at all.
So would you agree that it'd be safe to say that the value of this resource is probably over $1 trillion and one of the largest complements of combined non-ferrous minerals anywhere on the face of the earth?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. Let me ask this too. We talk about these minerals, and there's a lot of attention now on critical minerals and rare earth elements. Critical minerals are going to be key to our future as a nation, both economically and strategically. If you could give me your perspective, because we see companies like Tesla that are already trying to get obligations for those minerals. Give us your perspective in knowing where we are today strategically with the need for these minerals, your perspective on the importance to the United States, both economically and strategically.
Yeah, we certainly saw that through the pandemic, that the supply chain issues are real. Mm-hmm. And they're becoming very real in the kind of mineral commodity thing. There are countries throughout the world that are buying up mineral resources all over the globe, you know.
Would it be safe to say those countries would include countries like China?
Yes, that would be safe to say. You know, it's well known, you know, they're buying all kinds of resources in Africa and so on, and kind of taking them off supply chains to the United States of America and just the Western world. So those are real serious issues, and so, you know, I mean, for a country like the United States, a very developed country, we need our own sources of minerals, you know, for our economy and for our national defense. It's just, those are just the facts, right? You know?
Very good. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Representative Tiffany from Wisconsin for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. What I heard from you, Mr. Baltich, is that tourism and industry can coexist. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I believe it 110%. We've done it forever. I mean, when you think about it, we had unchecked iron ore mining for 88 years. There was no government involvement in that. And I'll illustrate, in the Pioneer Mine where my grandfather worked for 16 years, he built a cabin and the resort just kind of evolved over the years. But he worked for 16 years in an underground mine. That was a particularly crumbly, wet mine. And they were pumping out of that mine 1 million gallons of water a day into Shagwell Lake, which is a lake that's right on the edge of Ely. Ely basically is right there. 1 million gallons a day, and that would go from Shagwell Lake to Fall Lake to Basswood Lake. That's right into the heart of the boundary waters, and from there it makes it all the way up to Rainy Lake. So it's in the Rainy Lake watershed, and that happened. And during that time, there were resorts running, and people were doing business. Everybody was fine, and I mean, I wouldn't recommend dumping a million gallons per day now. You know, that's insane, but that's what they did back then. And after all those years, they still made the boundary waters.
So your business did better while industry was successful.
I'm sorry, say again?
So, tourism did better while industry was successful.
Yes, it absolutely does better when industry is there because we have more exposure. Our advertising mass as a tourism entity goes up.
So if I may interject, I got a lot of questions to ask here. I'll just interject. I own a business called Wilderness Cruises in northern Wisconsin over in the Minocqua area. And we had the same exact experience. We were in the hospitality tourism business. For all you young folks that are out there listening here, this is not a mutually exclusive question in regards to the environment and the economy. They work together. We have a better chance to have a clean environment when we have a strong economy, because then you have the tax revenues to be able to fund those programs, oftentimes publicly funded, as a result of having a strong economy. They are not mutually exclusive. You were at the Eagle Mine. Did you have a chance to go to the Eagle Mine?
No, unfortunately, I have not been there.
I would urge everyone who, if you get a chance, go up to the Eagle Mine in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in Representative Bergman's district, because it is an example of 21st century mining that can be done successfully and done in a perfect manner, which, obviously we don't want to do things like we did 60, 80, 100 years ago. And that's part of the reason we have such good permitting processes now. But if you want to see a mine that's just been built in the last 20 years in North America, here in the upper Midwest, go up to the Eagle Mine. Mrs. Johnson, how was the maple syrup season this year?
Not as good as past years, but we just finished up canning. We do a very small operation, so only a gallon of syrup.
So we just passed a bill in the debt ceiling bill. First of all, we passed the bill a couple weeks prior to that, but we included it in the debt ceiling bill called H.R. 1, Lowering Energy Costs, and it had permitting reform in it. And we did not reduce any environmental standards. We just changed the permitting processes, but we did not change the environmental standards. Are you willing to live by those high environmental standards? Do we need to reduce environmental standards in order to get these projects done?
You know, I'd say for our project, we are very early stages. We have not yet started our permitting process. We're also a bit unique because we are on state and private land, so we will primarily be going through a state permitting process with a few of the federal permits. But ultimately, our team is confident that we will be proposing a plan that will meet or exceed environmental standards.
Mr. Peterson, in your experience, is it necessary to compromise environmental standards to be able to mine in the 21st century?
Absolutely not.
Is it more likely for a manufacturer to build here, to manufacture in the United States if the minerals are produced here, or if they're built, or if they're produced overseas?
If I was the general manager of the plant, I'd want the minerals produced here. So you have domestic supplies, so you can actually, I mean, just go back a couple of years in the pandemic. You remember all of the boats off of
Long Beach?
Long Beach, that's it, right, you know? They were just dozens of them or hundreds of them were sitting there waiting to unload, right, you know, and they couldn't.
So we're more likely to have manufacturing here in this country, the downstream that's going to happen if we're producing the minerals here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I would just say in closing, this is all about three things in the big picture: job security, economic security, and national security. That's what's at stake here for America. There used to be a mine that operated in my district, the Montreal mine, right near Hurley, Wisconsin, closed in the mid-1960s. Then candidate John F. Kennedy went there in 1960, excuse me, and he went deep down in that mine, thousands of feet down in his wingtip loafers, and he told those miners, you were every bit as important in us winning World War II as the people that were there at the front. That's how important this is, that we be able to produce these minerals here in America. It is a necessity that we're able to do it. Thank you very much, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Tiffany. The chair now recognizes my friend and colleague from Georgia, Mr. Collins, for 5 minutes.
I think that thing's gonna fall back down. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as me being from Georgia now, I don't talk as fast as Miss Tiffany. I think I should get 30% more time.
Give him 6 minutes.
You know, folks, I've only been at this job for about 115 days now. So I'm the rookie in the crowd. And when I was out there campaigning, I like for folks to know that I'm in the trucking business, one of the most regulated businesses that there is, an industry that there is in this country. And so it was very important that I wanted to make sure that we had oversight in every committee that we had in Congress to find out what is going on across this country. Because I know if the regulations that were hampering the trucking industry out there, it's across every industry that there is. I don't know anything about mining. I have no idea. I thought I was coming up here to get a hat and a pickaxe. But from what I've learned, y'all pretty much set the standard for today's industry of mining right here in this area. When I sit down at a hearing, I look at it from a business person's standpoint. What's the problem? What's the solution? And how do we fix this so that it doesn't happen again? And so that's what I would like to focus on. And is it Mr. Baltich? Baltich. You and I think a lot alike. I'm from small town, and I know we talked about that. And I just want to real quickly, I mean, my questions are pretty simple. Do you think the permitting process now has become a weaponized tool used to prevent mining?
Yes,
Okay.
I absolutely do.
Can you expand on that as far
Yeah,
as?
yes, it's not to interrupt. It seems to me that it's taking a ridiculously long time. Well, actually, I can give you an idea. In 2005, well, in 1978, the mining industry and Minnesota and the environmental groups got together to make us an arduous set of rules to restrict copper nickel mining in our area, because they knew that we're sitting on something, and they knew we're since the early 60s they've been looking at our region for copper nickel. When I was a kid, I was given a little 1 inch by 1 inch cube of nickel, pure nickel. I've got it somewhere in my basement. I can't find it, but I didn't know then what it meant, but I do now. And they got together and made a set of rules in '78, and they said, well, if the mining industry meets all these rules, all these requirements, then they can mine, or then they can explore. And they figured nobody'd ever catch up with that. And in 2005, mining technology went here, and all of a sudden they were able to do that. And when they started doing that, they went to Minnesota and the groups and said, well, here, we can hit all of these standards that you guys are requiring, all the requirements, we can meet them all. And Minnesota said, go ahead, start poking holes in the ground. Let's see what you find, you know. And the environmentalists went off the deep end and said they had no leg to stand on because they all signed off on this. They denied signing it. They said, we didn't do that. No, that's not true, blah, blah, blah. And, well, you did sign it. So what did they do? They moved to change public opinion against mining. And in 2006, they went after the Forest Service and they made the mining industry, Twin Metals, put together a $1 million report that took from 2006 to 2012 to, show that the birds and the bees and the crickets and everything's going to be fine. And it became a very restrictive process with suing all along the way, and it's all to weaponize the public opinion against mining. And I don't know if it's happening elsewhere in the world. I suspect it is, but it's become a popular way to do it.
And that's exactly what I'm getting at. You know, it hasn't been 2 weeks ago when I was talking about the financial industry and our community banks. And it's all about moving the goalpost.
Right.
Every time you get to where you think you're able to get the permit or you meet what's adequate
Right.
for the federal government, they move it one
you
further
need this.
step. You know, we just had this so-called infrastructure bill that was passed. It was in the previous Congress, $1.2 trillion. $591 billion of it actually went to infrastructure. The rest of it went towards Green New Deal. Now, this does not make any common sense, folks. Here we are, we're buying our critical minerals from people that want to take us over and hate us, communist Chinese people. And we've got mining sitting right here with the best processes in the world. Now, Mr. Balcher, do you think that the U.S. can do a better job mining than China that's using child labor?
Yeah, yes, very much so. It's almost kind of laughable. China's over there doing whatever they do, and our environmental groups seem to be fine with that. And I don't understand how you can be fine with that, knowing what we know about China. And then there's a thing called the stratosphere and various other spheres that are running over us. Every time they send up a cloud of dust in China, it ends up raining down in the Boundary Waters Canoe area. We get mercury from them. I'm sure we get heavy metals and other sorts of pollutants because we're on a globe and the air runs around it. Americans do a much better job, and I will testify to the Americans on the Iron Range because I know a bunch of them. You won't see, years ago, they used to take a D9 cat that they're pushing rocks around at a mine, and it needs an oil change. It's got 40 gallons of oil in it. They would just open the spigot, dump it on the ground, and say, well, it keeps the dust down. And then they'd shut the spigot and dump 40 more gallons of oil in that cat. Try to find somebody today who will do that. That doesn't happen. It's not going to happen. None of our guys who mine, the employees, do not want to mess up their backyard. This is where we hunt and fish. They want to take care of the environment, and so does management. We do an immensely better job than a lot of places in the world because this is our home.
Thank you, Mr. Balcher. Mr. Chairman, I know my time has expired, but I think it's pretty easy to see that we found the problem is the federal government. The solution is to get them off our back. And to keep them off of there, this H.R. 1 needs to be passed.
Thank you. The next member of Congress who's going to question is my good friend from Indiana, Mr. Bouchon. You're up for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you and the committee for inviting me to weigh on this. I'm from Southwest Indiana. My dad was an underground coal miner for Peabody for over 30 years. It's a different type of mining, but similar. And I serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee, Energy Subcommittee, and so this issue is critically important to energy, our energy future in this country. Ms. Johnson, maybe I can ask you, what are some of the common misconceptions about modern mining that has resulted in some environmental groups wanting to ban mining and wanting the administration to ban mining in certain areas of Minnesota?
Yeah, I think we've touched on it a few times, but
I think this is something we have to say over and over and over again.
I think it's the comparison to how mining was done historically, and it's just not the same anymore. Like we touched on, modern mining isn't allowed to do the things that happened long ago. And I also think a big part of it is public education about the entire process. For our project specifically, we're in the early stages. We have not yet shaped our final plans to start permitting. But early on, we've been trying to engage and educate the public on all the work that happens early on. We're not just submitting a plan and saying, let's go, without having all of the knowledge ready. We do a lot of work being as transparent as possible. We actually have an open door policy at our project just in the exploration phase. So people are able to come to our project. They can see firsthand how we go about exploring, meet our team, talk to our environmental scientists, and really get a better understanding of the full process. And I think that's what's needed.
Yeah, I think that's right. Anybody else want to have any comments about that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, there's a perception that like mining companies don't care about the environment, which is the farthest thing from the truth, right? All the people from the top on down, everybody, at least I'm a geologist, so I've spent my life out in the field, and I don't know how many times I've been in the Boundary Waters. I mean, I love camping and fishing, and I just love being out in I just call it the bush, right? It's just, it's my place, right? The most comfortable place on earth for me is actually being out in northern Minnesota. But there's another thing, it's like, I can just think of talent. Okay, you get this thing all defined. What are you going to do? They're going to go to the bank, right? It's like, we need $1 billion, right? Has anybody ever gone to the bank and asked for $1 billion? It's
I can't
not
say
a
it.
simple
I can't
task,
say as I
right?
have. No.
You think, I mean, environmental impact statements are hard,
Yeah.
but convincing a bank to give you $1 billion is even harder, right? They're so risk adverse, and what do they ask? They ask about environmental issues. It's just ingrained in you. So people in mining actually totally get that, right? It's like, we have to do this because if we don't do this correctly, there's no way this project is going forward because we will never get the money to actually do it, and so that's what I want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I've experienced this in the coal mining industry, compared to the way it was, when my great-grandfather was a coal miner back in the 1930s compared to today, and where we are technology-wise, and also, again, as both of you pointed out, everybody in the industry lives on the earth and they want to protect the environment. I have a big agricultural area, and another issue, sometimes we have things related to agriculture and farmers, and again, environmental groups are critical of the farmers for a variety of different things. There couldn't be more people more strongly for the environment on the face of the earth other than people that mine the soil, that plant and utilize the soil as their job every day. So I think one of the things that's important I found is to bring people, like this hearing, bring people, and we need to have some of our colleagues that have a different view of ours come here, because unless you're there and you talk to the people, I find that you really can't make a good judgment. I'll say this, my final. I invited President Obama to come to an underground mine in my district. I invited him personally. He happened to come to the district for something else, and I invited him, and he never came. But if he would have talked to the workers and saw what was happening, I think maybe their view of the situation would have been maybe a little different. I yield.
Thank you very much. And before we get to the last speaker, I've been asked, the buses need to pick up the students. People, if you are parked in a bus lane, please move your vehicle immediately. The buses have to get in. And if you even think you're parked, go double check so the buses can safely load the children from the school. And our last witness is General Jack Bergman from the great state of Michigan. Congressman Bergman, you're up for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for inviting me to join you all. This is really coming back to my roots in so many ways. When my dad's family came to the U.S. from Sweden, my grandfather was actually born in the company mine clinic in Montreal. So And, when Rep. Tiffany mentioned that, my grandpa was an iron miner. On my mom's side, we had relatives who lived and worked the mines in Hibbing for a very, very long time. So for me, this is a chance to rekindle some thoughts I had as a young boy and as a young man as I chose professions and watched my friends decide what they wanted to do in life. But the one thing, at least the guys and gals that I hung around with, we all love the outdoors. And even, by the way, I left the snow in the UP when I came here yesterday. I want you to know I did not bring it with me, but we got a foot of new snow yesterday, and I had to cut a tree out of my driveway to get on the road to get over here. But the point is, we are all God's people, and guess who put all the minerals here? It wasn't happenstance. It's part of God's plan. But the idea that there are entities, and they pretty much by and large break down to governmental entities who are energized by a few probably nice but clueless individuals who don't understand what it means to enjoy the environment, to do all the things we do with the environment, whether it's grow, whether it's mine, whether it's fish, whether it's you name it. But we are so blessed to live in the part of the world that we live in with all its natural resources. I would suggest to you that as my colleague, Mr. Collins, talked about government being part of the problem, I think one of the uniting factors in Washington, D.C. that I've seen amongst moderate folks who can see both sides of a coin, and in some cases the third edge, it's war on the federal bureaucracies that control all the issues that we're talking about here, which is taking a permitting process and extending it past the reasonable length that anybody in any endeavor would say, I mean, you're just messing with me now. You're not actually providing any results. So I think what we can do better at the federal side is cut down the bureaucracies and get the federal government out of your pockets, off your backs, and out of the way. So speaking of bureaucracies, I guess what I'd ask the panel is that, you have federal bureaucracies and you have state bureaucracies. Would any of you care to comment on how the state of Minnesota, because they're a sovereign state here, how they are reacting and being a partner or not as far as moving mining forward?
Well, at the governor's level, we don't have any support. I don't feel we have any support at all from Governor Walz. And he's hanging in with all the environmental groups against mining. He's pushing for a green industry, but he's not supporting mining in northeastern Minnesota. I don't understand how you can connect those two dots. We want to have electric cars which need a lot of copper. The average Toyota Prius, which is a hybrid, takes 75 pounds of copper. I don't know how many pounds goes into an electric car just of nickel. I mean, when Talon gets up and running, they're going to do very well on all that nickel that they're going to need. But meanwhile, we don't have enough resources right now to do all that the governor wants to do in a very short amount of time, and yet the governor isn't supporting mining in his own state. At least we could be, as we're lining up for this big pipe dream, we could at least be mining, in Ely and being ready to go, as opposed to, I'm going to expound just a touch. The Boundary Waters Act has a line in it, a paragraph, that says, that's PL 95495, it says that the president, in times of national need, can override the entire Boundary Waters law. And that means that he can go 5 miles past my house and start drilling where the copper nickel is right at the surface in Lake 1 and just start pecking at the rocks right there and doing whatever they need to do because we're in a national emergency. So does it make more sense that our governor has a mine in place so we're ready to mine in case of a national emergency? Wouldn't it be better to have the infrastructure here now instead of waiting until, oh my God, we're being invaded, we got to go and start digging up rocks and wreck everything? We could have the mine, we'd have the infrastructure in place. Our governor is not doing that. Our legislature is not doing that. They're chasing transgenderism and gosh knows what else.
Can I add for a second here?
So what I heard you say, now I'm a Marine, so I very, very, 2-syllable words. Don't confuse me. Give me the color crayons you want me to use in case any of you engage in those inter-service cultural jokes. But what I just heard you say is that what we're trying to do as the federal government, the leadership, or let's put it this way, the people occupying the leadership positions in Minnesota right now still could be part of a problem ongoing when it comes to unraveling the ball of string and pulling out the bad pieces so that we can get moving forward. Dr. Peterson or Ms. Johnson, would either of you care to comment from your perspective on your interactions, let's say, with the University of Minnesota or other, state and federally funded institutions as you do research? Any thoughts on their commitment to good results in mining?
Yeah, absolutely. From a geology perspective, the state of Minnesota is probably the best in the country in that they've funded a really strong geological survey. The DNR's got the drill core library. I don't know if you guys, it's unbelievable, a lot of the ideas behind it go way back to the foundation of the University of Minnesota with people by the name of Pillsbury and things like that. And a lot of these things that has happened in Minnesota is because of the Iron Range and because of the University Trust Fund and so on, and how much money royalties the University of Minnesota made by mining university-owned land from the Minnesota Territory kind of thing. And there were some very smart individuals at the university who've went into state government to preserving data. So the DNR has got an incredible treasure trove of geological data. They work extensively with the U.S. Geological Survey. Just our LiDAR coverage.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of, what I heard you say, a lot of capabilities, a lot of understanding and knowledge that is based in fact,
yes,
not fantasy. Ms. Johnson, any closing thoughts here? Because my time is way over.
Yep. I think I would just add to what Dina said. We're in that early stage of our project. So with exploration, I would say we have a really good relationship with the DNR, with our mineral exploration permits. But as we move forward to the environmental review and permitting process, we are just hopeful for a science-based, fair, and timely process.
Well, we are the United States of America. The best solutions come at, by far, the local levels. And I would suggest to you I think Michigan and Minnesota right now have a couple of things in common. They have a lack of leadership in the State House, but I'll leave that for another conversation for a different time. And that could probably lend its all the way out to 1600 Pennsylvania in Washington, D.C. But we got an opportunity to change that here. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you all for being here, especially you all in the crowd.
I want to conclude here. I want to thank the witnesses for your valuable testimony and also the members for their questions. Again, thank you for coming up to northern Minnesota and really being able to examine Minnesota's mineral wealth. As you've heard, there's only one other state that has more mineral wealth than Minnesota, that's Alaska. The members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we will ask you to respond to these in writing. Under Committee Rule 3, members of the committee must submit questions to the committee clerk by 5 p.m. on Friday, March 3rd. The hearing record, May 3rd. The hearing record will be held open for 10 business days for these responses. If there's no further business, without objection, the committee stands adjourned.